Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through a list of some anime, some manga, some video games, and a show that I think have fantastic character relationships. Over on my main channel, which I primarily talk about fantasy books over there, there's been this trend that's become very, very popular as of late where fantasy romance is kind of taking over. And so over on that main channel, I wanted to recommend books that are not fantasy romance, but that have really fantastic romantic subplots, because I know for a lot of people they love fantasy and they don't mind the romantic subplot, they just don't want it to take over the main plot. And I figured there's probably a lot of people that feel that way about their anime, manga, video games, and those sorts of things as well. So I wanted to highlight some of these stories within these mediums that I think have those really great romantic subplots, or at least there's an idea that maybe certain characters might get together and you're watching them as they get closer together and they grow and they push each other. You have that going on, but again, it doesn't take over the plot. The first recommendation would be Spy Family. I can't think of something that comes to mind quicker that isn't necessarily complete just yet, and that I'm always like, so they're gonna fall in love, right? That's kind of the feeling that I think a lot of people have for two of the main characters in this story. Watching these characters get to know each other, watching the found family develop within Spy Family, I think is incredibly heartwarming. I think it's sweet, and I think it's one of the things that has made it so successful and so popular. If you don't know, which I'm sure you do, the setup for the story is you follow a spy named Lloyd Forger who has to pretend to have a family in order to do his particular mission, and the woman that he marries does not know that he's a spy, and he does not know that she's an assassin, and then their daughter, the young girl they've adopted, is a telepath, but she doesn't always really know what to do with the information that she gets when she reads people's minds. So that's the setup for the story, and you're watching as all of these characters get to know each other, they help each other grow, and you're like, oh, can they be a real family? And so I think that this perfectly captures what I'm describing, where there's always something going on with the main plot, but then the shenanigans that ensue with this family and the way that they get to know each other, they push each other, and they grow to care about each other is fantastic. After that, we have the show Arcane. Pretty much every single character relationship is fantastic, and you could do entire videos dedicated to dissecting the character relationships. But I do think this is one of those series where there is a particular duo, if we're talking about romantic things occurring, or maybe will they occur in the romantic tension building. There are two characters in this that I think a lot of people are waiting to see what transpires between these two characters. There is a certain trope of these characters coming from different sides, not quite enemies necessarily, but the people from different worlds, you could almost say, where one is from the Undercity, one is from the Upper City. And the way that they help each other change their perspectives of the other side. That's one of my favorite things to see in any character relationship, but with romantic ones especially, that's where I feel like it can be very hard to do, but when done well, it's some of the best. And so we're currently seeing what feels like a little spark between these characters, and I'm just kind of waiting for that to grow. I mean, I can't wait for season 2 anyway. There's so many, like I said, fantastic relationships. There's great characters. They're great everything. There's great everything in Arcane. But these two characters I've also seen have inspired so much fan art, and I'm ready. I'm ready to see these characters. I mean, I hope, right? Because it could also turn out to be tragic. If you don't know, Arcane primarily follows the characters from the Undercity and the Upper City, and the two that are kind of leading the charge with the plot would be Powder, I'll call her in case you haven't seen the show, and Vi. And those two are sisters, and there is a time skip at some point, and you're seeing the way that the hardships of life pull these two sisters apart, and then you watch as they try to come back to each other. There's so much more to the show than that, but I'll leave it there. After that, Full Metal Alchemist. Is there another series that we can think of where you never really see things happen on page, I guess you could say, or if you're watching the anime, you don't really see it on screen, but yet we're all like, okay, but those two are our couple. There's a couple in particular that I feel like everybody's like, yeah, I mean, they're partners in every sense, and they've got each other's back, and they are there for each other. They're I mean, there's just so many moments where, when I was saying before, like characters that help each other grow and that push each other, there's a specific duo in Full Metal Alchemist that do this better, I feel like, than any other duo in any other series. And you actually see certain scenes play out where you really see a character have to push and push and push to keep a character true to themselves and their ideals. And it's so fantastically done, but they're also very protective of each other. They're goofy with each other, and they're the best. If you don't know, Full Metal Alchemist follows two brothers who one lost an arm and a leg, and the other lost his entire body, and his soul had to be attached to a suit of armor due to an alchemical experiment gone wrong where they tried to bring their mother back from the dead. So that's that general setup. There's another relationship that's very sweet to watch unfold, and similar to Arcane. So many great characters and so many great character relationships. So Full Metal, there's a reason that all of these basically are some of my favorites. They're all so good. And then we have some video games. So Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy XVI. The duo in 10 is so sweet and so pure, and their innocence is just adorable. And them, it really truly is the extreme of like, we're from different places and we come together and we inspire each other. And my friend, when we did a tier ranking of Final Fantasy characters, which I'll have that video linked, we talked about how one of the characters is almost a completely different character from the beginning to the end of the game. And part of that is the way in which they grow due to their relationship with one of the characters. It's so beautifully done. If you don't know, for this one as well, Final Fantasy X follows a young man who was a star athlete in his world, and then he's suddenly transported to what seems to be 1,000 years in the future, and things are not looking better. They're looking very dire, and he ends up joining with a young woman who is a summoner whose job it is to try and defeat this massive creature known as Sin that is wreaking havoc on their world. There's also a lot of other characters that are a part of their party, and just like basically everything else, it's not just the romantic subplot, but it's also a lot of the other relationships between characters that make Final Fantasy X so special. Final Fantasy XVI, okay, can the two main characters be any more perfect? These two are both so cool. They're so caring of other people, they're empathetic, and they're awesome at the same time. And I love them. I love them so much. They're also independently really amazing characters, and then together they're just the most perfect. And they're there for each other. They care for each other. They have a past together that's really quite sweet, but they've been through so much, and they stick together through everything they've been through. Final Fantasy XVI follows a young man named Clive, who, after some really devastating things occurred in his childhood, he is now doing what he can to try and get revenge. And the path that takes him on takes a lot of twists and turns that he was not expecting. The last video game, in this case, that I'll mention would be Tales of Arise. The two characters in this game are so drastically different from one another, and there's a lot of fantastic characters in this. If you're somebody who's a huge fan of anime and you've only really dipped your toes in video games, or you've never really played video games, this is such a good one because the art style is very similar to what you get with a lot of anime. A lot of the tropes are going to be present that you're probably accustomed to, and the characters in this, it truly is what I described at the beginning of just watching the relationship build, but maybe not necessarily seeing things happen, quote unquote, on screen. So there's reasons as to why, and I don't want to reveal that because it does have to do with one of the specific characters. But this story, it kind of is a very convoluted, bizarre plot, but you follow a young man who seems to not really feel pain, and he is trying to use that to his advantage to help people who are in need of aid. So that's what I'll say about Tales of Arise. It's a lot of fun. Hootle is the cutest thing ever. But anyway, that's it for some stories that have absolutely fantastic character relationships. I'm zeroing in on the romantic side, but so many of these have great relationships all around anyway. If you're interested in seeing the video I did on my main channel where I talk about fantasy books, where this is the case, then I'll have that linked. But thanks so much for watching. Please let me know your recommendations for this. I would love to know. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.